The moment Elena Vale walked into that coffee shop wearing her plainest clothes and practiced invisibility, she had no idea the man waiting at table 7 could destroy her with a single phone call, or that he'd choose to love her instead. Roman DeLuca doesn't do blind dates. He doesn't do gentle. But when he saw this terrified woman who wanted nothing from him, something ancient and buried cracked open inside his chest. What happens when the most dangerous man in the city falls for the one woman who wishes she could disappear? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The coffee shop smelled like burned espresso and somebody's overly optimistic cinnamon experiment. Elena Vale stood in the doorway longer than any normal person should, her fingers death-gripping the strap of her discount store purse like it might save her from drowning. She'd dressed for camouflage, gray cardigan that swallowed her whole, jeans so faded they looked apologetic, hair pulled back in a ponytail that screamed, "Please don't perceive me." The blind date had been Marissa's idea. Marissa, her painfully optimistic coworker who believed everyone deserved love and second chances and other fairy tales that belonged in picture books, not real life. Elena had said no 14 times. Marissa had worn her down with the persistence of water against stone. "He's a friend of my husband's cousin," Marissa had promised, like that genealogical distance somehow made it safer. "Nice guy, successful, just wants to meet someone real." Real? Elena almost laughed. She'd been real once, and it had cost her everything. She scanned the coffee shop with the paranoid efficiency of someone who'd learned to map exits. Small tables. Couples pretending to work on laptops. A woman with a stroller blocking the bathroom. And there, at table 7 by the window, a man who made every other person in the room look like they were rendered in lower resolution. He sat perfectly still, which was the first thing that registered as wrong. Nobody sat that still. His suit probably cost more than her car, the car she'd sold 6 months ago, and his hands were folded on the table like he was waiting for something inevitable. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that tracked her the moment she took a step inside. Elena's survival instinct screamed at her to leave. She walked toward table 7 anyway, because she'd promised Marissa, and because backing out now would require explanations she didn't want to give. "Hi." Her voice came out smaller than intended. Are you Daniel?" The man looked at her for 3 seconds that felt like an audit of her entire existence. "No," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, expensive somehow. "But I think your Daniel isn't coming." Elena blinked. "What?" He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit down before you pass out. You look like you're about to run." "I'm not." She was absolutely about to run, her face heated. "How do you know about Daniel?" "I don't know anything about Daniel." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "But I've been sitting here for 40 minutes, and you're the third woman who's walked in looking terrified and hopeful in exactly that order. The first 2 left crying. I'm assuming Daniel is having a very busy afternoon standing up multiple people, or he doesn't exist." The words hit like cold water. Elena stood frozen, her brain trying to process the humiliation, while her body decided whether to cry or just dissolve into the floorboards. She couldn't finish the sentence. "I should go. You should sit down first." It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. "At least have coffee. You came all this way." Elena didn't know why she sat. Maybe because her legs were shaking. Maybe because something in his voice suggested he understood exactly how much courage it had taken to walk through that door. Maybe because she was so tired of running from everything. She sat. Up close, he was even more devastating. Not handsome in a friendly way. Handsome in a way that made you think of marble sculptures and Greek tragedies and men who started wars. There was something glacial in his composure. Something that suggested violence sleeping under expensive tailoring. "I'm Roman," he said. "Elena." She twisted her hands in her lap. "This is so embarrassing." "Why?" "Because I got catfished by someone who set up 3 blind dates in one coffee shop." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's a new personal low, even for me." Roman's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "You think this is your fault?" It wasn't a question. "I think I should have known better." Elena stared at the table. I usually know better. I don't do this, dates or hope or any of it. My friend talked me into it, and I was stupid enough to— You weren't stupid. Roman's voice went quieter, which somehow made it heavier. Someone lied to you. That's not the same thing as you being foolish. Elena looked up at him, startled by the certainty in his words. A waitress appeared, young, pretty, immediately focused on Roman with the kind of attention that suggested she'd already mapped out their wedding. What can I get you? Coffee, Roman said without looking at her. Black? And whatever she wants. The waitress's smile dimmed when she realized Roman wasn't going to make eye contact. She turned to Elena with significantly less enthusiasm. For you? Just tea. Chamomile, if you have it. The waitress left. The silence felt enormous. You don't have to stay, Elena said quietly. I'm sure you have somewhere else to be. I don't. Everyone has somewhere else to be. Roman tilted his head slightly, studying her. Do you want me to leave? The honest answer was no, which made no sense at all. She didn't know this man. He was clearly out of her league in every measurable way. But there was something in the way he looked at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her, that made her feel visible for the first time in months. I don't know, she admitted. Then I'll stay until you do. The waitress returned with their drinks, shooting Roman a look that could have melted steel. He didn't notice. Elena wrapped her hands around the tea mug and let the warmth seep into her palms. Why were you here for 40 minutes? She asked. Meeting someone. A date? Business. Roman picked up his coffee but didn't drink it. He was late. I don't wait for people who are late. But you waited for me. You weren't late. You were on time for something that didn't exist. He set the cup down. That's different. Elena didn't know what to do with that logic. She sipped her tea and tried not to notice how intensely he was watching her. Not in a creepy way, not like the men who used to corner her at her old job, or the ones who'd made comments when she wore the wrong thing. Roman watched her like she was a puzzle he was genuinely trying to solve. What do you do? She asked, desperate to fill the silence with something normal. Import and export. It was the kind of answer that meant nothing. Elena knew that, but she was too tired to push. What about you? I work at a bookstore. She said it quickly, before the shame could catch up. Part-time. It's not much, but it's quiet, and they don't mind if I'm not— She stopped herself. It's fine. Roman's gaze sharpened. Not what? Nothing. Elena looked into her tea like it held escape routes. I'm not really a people person. The bookstore is mostly online orders and inventory. It works for me. You don't like people, or people don't like you. The question was so direct it knocked the breath out of her. Does it matter? Yes. Elena set down her mug carefully. Why are you asking me that? Because you walked in here looking like you expected to get hurt, Roman said quietly. And now you're sitting across from a stranger telling me about a job you're clearly overqualified for while apologizing for existing. I'm trying to figure out which part is the real you. Heat flooded her face. You don't know anything about me. No, he agreed, but I'd like to. The sincerity in his voice was worse than mockery would have been. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd welded shut a year ago when Marcus had— No, she wasn't thinking about Marcus. Why? Her voice came out sharp. You don't know me. This isn't even a real date. In 10 minutes, you're going to finish your coffee and leave and forget this ever happened. Roman was quiet for a long moment. My world is full of people who want things from me, he said finally. Money, access, protection, favors. Everyone I meet is performing. Everyone has an angle. He paused. You walked in here trying to make yourself invisible. You ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. You keep apologizing for taking up space. Either you're the best actress I've ever met, or you genuinely want nothing from me. I'm betting on the second one. Elena stared at him. That's the saddest reason I've ever heard for wanting to talk to someone. Something flickered across Roman's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Yes, he said softly. It is. The honesty in that single word undid something in Elena. She looked at this beautiful, dangerous man in his expensive suit, sitting in a mediocre coffee shop because someone had stood him up for a business meeting, and she saw the exhaustion behind his eyes. The same exhaustion she saw in her own mirror every morning. "I was engaged once," she heard herself say. "His name was Marcus. We were together for 3 years. He handled all our finances because I was bad with money. That's what he told me anyway. Turned out he was draining my accounts, taking out credit cards in my name, building up debt while I thought we were saving for a wedding." Her voice stayed steady, flat. "By the time I found out, he'd disappeared with everything. I lost my apartment, my car. My credit score is somewhere in hell. That's why I work part-time at a bookstore and live in a studio that costs more than it's worth. That's why my friend had to beg me for 6 months to even consider dating again. That's why I dress like this, because looking invisible feels safer than being seen." She stopped. The silence was deafening. Roman hadn't moved. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "I don't know why I just told you all that." "Because I asked," Roman said quietly. "And because you needed to tell someone." Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "His full name," Roman said. "Marcus what?" Elena's head snapped up. "What?" "His full name." "Why?" Roman's expression didn't change, but something cold moved through his eyes. "Because men who do that should be held accountable." "It's been a year. The police said there wasn't enough evidence to—" She stopped. "Wait, what are you going to do?" "Nothing that concerns you." "That's not an answer." "No," Roman agreed. "It's not." They stared at each other across the table. Elena's heart was hammering. This man was a stranger. She didn't know him, didn't know what he was capable of, but something in his voice when he'd said, "held accountable," made her believe he could do things the police couldn't, things she shouldn't want. "Marcus Donnelly," she whispered. Roman's phone was out before she'd finished the name. He typed something quickly, then put it away. "Done." "What do you mean done?" "I mean, I know people who know people. By tomorrow, Marcus Donnelly's life is going to become very complicated." He picked up his coffee. "You won't hear from him, but his creditors will." Elena should have been horrified, should have told him to stop, that it wasn't right, that you couldn't just— "Thank you," she said instead. Roman studied her for a long moment. Then he did something she hadn't expected. He smiled. Not much, just a slight curve of his mouth, but it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost human. "You're welcome." They sat in the coffee shop until the light outside turned golden. Roman asked her about the bookstore, and Elena found herself talking about her favorite authors, the customers who came in looking for comfort, the way she organized the shelves when the manager wasn't looking. He listened like every word mattered, asked questions that weren't just polite filler, remembered details she'd mentioned 10 minutes ago. When she asked about his work, he gave careful, vague answers that told her nothing and everything. Import and export, investments, international logistics. The kind of language that sounded legitimate and felt like smoke. Elena didn't push. She was too busy trying to figure out why this felt easy, why sitting across from this intense, clearly dangerous man felt safer than being alone in her apartment. "I should go," she said finally, watching the sun sink lower. "I have a shift tomorrow morning." Roman nodded. He didn't argue or try to extend the conversation, just signaled for the check, paid before Elena could even reach for her purse, and stood when she did. Outside, the evening air was cool. Elena wrapped her cardigan tighter. "Can I give you a ride?" Roman asked. "I live close. I can walk." "Then I'll walk with you." "You don't have to—" "I know." He was already moving toward the sidewalk. "Which direction?" Elena gave up and pointed left. They walked in silence for a block, the city sounds filling the space between them. She was hyper-aware of him beside her, tall, controlled, moving like violence on a leash. "This is me," she said when they reached her building. It was a converted warehouse divided into 2 small apartments, the kind of place that advertised charm and delivered barely functional plumbing. Roman looked at the building, then at her. "It's not safe." "It's what I can afford." "That's not the same as safe." Elena bristled. "I've been fine for a year." That doesn't mean you'll be fine tomorrow." He pulled out his phone. "Let me—" "No." She said it sharply enough that he stopped. "I don't need you to fix my life. I just needed coffee and conversation. That's all. Roman put his phone away slowly. I'm sorry, you're right. The apology surprised her. I had a good time today, she said quietly. Even if it started as a disaster. Thank you for staying. Elena. Her name and his voice sounded different, careful. Can I see you again? She should say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this man was dangerous, that she knew nothing about him, that getting involved would only lead to disaster. Yes, she said. Roman's expression softened, barely, but enough that she saw it. Tomorrow night, dinner. Somewhere quiet. Okay. He handed her a business card. Simple, expensive card stock with just a name and phone number. No company, no title. Text me your address. I'll pick you up at 7. Elena took the card. Her fingers brushed his for half a second, and she felt the calluses on his palm, not the hands of someone who worked in an office. Good night, Roman. Good night. She walked into her building without looking back because if she looked back, she might change her mind, and part of her desperately didn't want to change her mind. In her apartment, one room that smelled like old carpets and the Thai restaurant downstairs, Elena sat on her secondhand couch and stared at the business card. She should throw it away. She should block the number. She should remember that nothing good came from men who seemed too good to be true. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed, "This is Elena. 412 Morrison Street, apartment 3B. See you tomorrow." The response came 30 seconds later. Sleep well. Elena didn't sleep well. She lay awake in the dark, replaying the conversation, trying to figure out what had just happened, trying to understand why a man like Roman DeLuca would want to see her again. She didn't have answers. But when she finally drifted off, she dreamed of coffee shops and careful hands, and someone who listened like her words were worth remembering. The next evening, Elena stood in front of her closet, having a minor crisis. She owned exactly 3 outfits that could qualify as date clothes, and all of them made her look like she was trying too hard or not trying at all. The black dress was too tight. The blue one had a stain she'd never been able to get out. The gray skirt and blouse combination made her look like she was interviewing for a job at a funeral home. She went with the black dress. It was too tight, but at least it was clean. At 6:55, she was pacing her apartment, second-guessing everything. Her makeup was too much. Her hair was stupid. She should cancel. She should fake being sick. She should... A knock at the door. Elena froze. He was early, or she was late, or time had stopped working correctly. She opened the door. Roman stood in the hallway wearing a different suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and holding a single white rose. He looked at her for 3 seconds, and something shifted in his expression. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. Elena's throat closed up. "I look nervous." "That too." He offered her the rose. "But mostly beautiful." She took the flower because her hands needed something to do. It was perfect. Not from a gas station, from somewhere that understood roses. "Let me just..." She turned back into her apartment looking for something to put it in. She didn't own a vase. She ended up putting it in a coffee mug filled with water, which felt like a metaphor for her entire life. When she turned back, Roman was watching her with something that might have been amusement. "Ready?" he asked. "No?" She grabbed her purse. "But let's go anyway." The car waiting outside was not what she expected. Black, sleek, clearly expensive, but not obscenely so. Roman opened the passenger door for her, an old-fashioned gesture that should have felt performative but somehow didn't. The interior smelled like leather, and something subtle she couldn't name. Roman slid into the driver's seat and the engine purred to life. "Where are we going?" Elena asked as they pulled into traffic. "You said somewhere quiet. I took you seriously." They drove north, away from the commercial district, into neighborhoods Elena didn't recognize, and trees appeared. Space between buildings. The city thinned into something that felt like the edge of escape. Roman pulled up to a restaurant that didn't have a sign. Just a door with a small brass number and soft light spilling through frosted windows. "Is this place even open?" Elena asked. "For us it is." That should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded like fact. Inside, the restaurant was small, maybe 8 tables, half of them empty. Warm lighting, music so quiet it was almost subliminal. A host appeared immediately, greeted Roman by name, and led them to a corner table that felt separate from the rest of the room. Elena sat down and looked around. Do you own this place? No. Do you know the owner? Yes. Are those different things? Roman's mouth curved. Sometimes. A waiter appeared with water and menus, but Roman waved the menus away. Tasting menu, whatever Marco's making tonight. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Elena stared at Roman. What if I have allergies? Do you? No, but you didn't ask. You're right, I should have asked. He leaned back slightly and she realized he was giving her space. Do you have allergies or dietary restrictions I should know about? No. Then trust me. It was such a simple statement, trust me, like it was easy. Like she hadn't learned the hard way that trust was the most dangerous thing you could give someone. I don't trust easily, Elena said. I know. How do you know? Because you spent 20 minutes yesterday telling me why you shouldn't trust anyone, and then you told me your ex-fiancé's full name so I could ruin his life. Roman's voice was matter of fact. You don't do that with people you trust. You do that with people you're testing. Elena's heart stopped. I wasn't. You were. He wasn't angry, just certain. You wanted to see if I'd follow through, if I was serious, if I was someone who kept promises. Did you? She whispered. Follow through? Marcus Donnelly had 4 outstanding warrants we didn't know about. Turns out he's been running the same con in 3 different states. He was arrested this morning trying to board a flight to Costa Rica. Roman picked up his water glass. He won't be bothering anyone else. Elena's hands were shaking. How did you? I know people. What kind of people know that kind of thing? Roman was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his glass and looked at her directly. People who operate outside normal channels, he said carefully. People who handle problems that can't be fixed through legal means. People who owe me favors or who want to stay on my good side. He paused. I'm not a good man, Elena. I want you to understand that before this goes any further. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. What do you mean? Elena's voice was barely audible. I mean, I run an organization that most people call criminal. I import and export things that aren't always legal. I make decisions that hurt people. I've done things I can't take back. His eyes never left hers. I'm telling you this now because you deserve to know who you're sitting across from. If you want to leave, I'll take you home. No questions, no hard feelings, but I won't lie to you. Elena's mind was racing. Criminal organization, import and export, people who owe him favors, Mafia. He was talking about the Mafia. She should leave, should run, should never look back. Why are you telling me this? She asked instead. Because you asked me to help you, and I did, and now you need to understand what that means. Roman's voice was steady. Because I don't want to build something with you that's based on you not knowing who I am, and because... He stopped, started again. Because I haven't felt this in a long time, this feeling of wanting to talk to someone, of wanting to know someone, and I don't want it to be based on a lie. Elena's chest felt tight. You barely know me. I know you're kind even though the world hasn't been kind to you. I know you try to make yourself small because someone convinced you that taking up space was dangerous. I know you work in a bookstore because it's safe, not because it's what you want. Roman leaned forward slightly. I know that when I asked if I could see you again, you said yes, even though everything in your history told you to say no. That takes courage, or stupidity. Not stupidity. He said it with absolute certainty. Never stupidity. The food arrived then, small, perfect plates that looked like art. Elena didn't taste any of it. She was too busy trying to process what Roman had just told her. He was a criminal, a mafia boss, a dangerous man. And he'd been honest with her about it. Marcus had lied about everything, had smiled and made promises and drained her bank accounts while telling her he loved her, had left her with nothing but debt and shame and the bone-deep certainty that she was too stupid to deserve better. Roman had known her for 24 hours and told her the truth about who he was, even though it might make her leave. I don't know what to do with this, Elena said finally. You don't have to do anything with it tonight. Roman's voice was gentle. I just needed you to know. They ate in silence for a while. The food was incredible. Delicate flavors, perfect textures, the kind of meal that required attention. Elena tried to focus on it, but her mind kept circling back to the man across from her. Can I ask you something? She said between courses. Anything. Why me? You could have anyone. Someone from your world. Someone who understands. She gestured vaguely. All of this. Roman set down his fork. Everyone in my world wants something. Power, money, status, safety. They look at me and see what I can give them. He paused. You looked at me and saw someone who stayed too long in a coffee shop. You didn't ask for my last name, didn't try to impress me, didn't perform. I was literally stood up by a fake date. I wasn't exactly in a position to perform. Exactly. Something soft moved through his expression. You were real. Messy and scared and honest. Do you know how rare that is? Elena didn't know what to say to that. They finished the meal. Roman paid. She didn't see money change hands, just a nod to the waiter. And then they were back in the car, driving through dark streets toward her apartment. I need time, Elena said as they pulled up to her building. To think about this. About what you told me. Of course. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that I understand. Roman turned in his seat to face her. Take all the time you need. If you decide this is too much, I'll respect that. But if you want to see me again, I'll be here. Elena looked at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd given her truth when she expected lies, and felt something crack open in her chest. Can I ask you one more thing? Yes. Do you hurt people who don't deserve it? Roman was quiet for a long moment. I try not to, he said finally, but I'm not always successful. It was the most honest answer anyone had ever given her. Elena leaned across the console and kissed him. It was brief, barely a brush of lips, but it felt like jumping off a cliff. When she pulled back, Roman's eyes were dark and intense. Good night, she whispered. Good night, Elena. She got out of the car and walked into her building without looking back, but she felt his eyes on her until the door closed behind her. Upstairs, in her too small apartment, Elena sat on her couch and tried to process what had just happened. She'd kissed a Mafia boss. And it had felt right. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He's been transferred to federal custody. 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft. Minimum 10 years. You're safe now. No signature. No explanation needed. Elena stared at the message, then at the white rose in her coffee mug, then at nothing at all. Tomorrow she would think about what this meant, about whether she could really be with someone like Roman, about whether she was brave enough or foolish enough to try. Tonight, she let herself feel something she hadn't felt in a year. Safe. 3 days passed before Elena texted him again. She'd spent those days walking through her life like it belonged to someone else. Shelving books at the store, eating cereal for dinner, lying awake at night replaying every conversation, every glance, every moment in that restaurant when Roman had told her the truth about who he was. A criminal. A mafia boss. A man who made his living in the shadows. And somehow, impossibly, the most honest person she'd met in years. On the 3rd night, she picked up her phone and typed, "Are you free tomorrow?" His response came immediately, like he'd been waiting. "For you? Yes." "What do you need?" She stared at those 4 words. What do you need? Not what do you want? Not what can I do for you? Just a simple question that somehow felt like it contained everything, just to talk. Coffee? I'll pick you up at 10. Elena set down her phone and tried to convince herself she wasn't making a massive mistake. Roman arrived at exactly 10, because apparently even time bent itself around his schedule. Elena was waiting outside her building wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, her hair in a messy bun because she'd given up on making it look intentional. He got out of the car when he saw her. That surprised her. Most men just honked or texted. He opened her door, waited until she was settled, then walked around to the driver's side with that controlled grace that made him look like he was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Where are we going?" Elena asked as they pulled into traffic. "You said coffee. I'm taking you for coffee." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have right now." He glanced at her briefly. "You've been thinking." "How do you know?" "Because you waited 3 days to text me. That means you've been processing what I told you, weighing whether it's worth the risk, trying to figure out if you're brave enough or crazy enough to keep seeing me." Roman's voice was calm, almost clinical. "Which one did you decide?" Elena twisted her hands in her lap. "I don't know yet." "Fair enough." They drove in silence for a while. The city shifted around them, commercial districts giving way to residential neighborhoods, then to areas with more space between buildings, more trees, more quiet. Roman finally pulled into a parking lot beside a small park Elena had never seen before. "This isn't a coffee shop," she said. "No." He turned off the engine. "But there's one across the street, and this felt like a conversation better had outside." He was right. Elena didn't know how he knew that, but he was right. They walked into the park, just a small green space with benches and a fountain that wasn't running. Roman bought coffee from a cart near the entrance, remembered she took hers with cream and sugar, even though she'd only ordered tea the first time they met, and handed it to her without comment. They sat on a bench overlooking the fountain. October morning sun filtered through mostly bare trees. Somewhere a dog barked, normal life happening all around them while Elena tried to figure out how to have this conversation. "I looked you up," she said finally. Roman didn't react. "And?" "There's not much online, some business registrations, a few photos from charity events, one article about your father from 15 years ago." She paused. "The article said he died in prison." "He did. It said he was convicted of racketeering, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder." "That's correct." Elena took a shaky breath. "Is that what you do?" "What he did?" Roman was quiet for a long moment, his coffee cooling in his hands. "My father built an empire on fear," he said finally. "He believed power came from making people terrified to cross you. He was brutal, unpredictable, violent. He hurt people because it sent a message." Roman's voice stayed level. "I took over his organization when I was 23, and I've spent the last 8 years trying to do things differently." "Differently how?" "I don't deal in drugs. I don't traffic people. I don't loan money to desperate people at rates designed to destroy them." He paused. "I run protection services for businesses that can't get help from police. I move goods across borders that probably shouldn't be moved, but don't harm anyone in the process. I handle disputes that the legal system can't or won't touch." "That's still illegal." "Yes. People still get hurt." "Sometimes." Roman turned to look at her directly. "I'm not going to pretend I'm a good person, Elena. I've made choices that keep me awake at night. I've hurt people who probably didn't deserve all of what they got. But I try, every single day I try, to be better than my father was, to use power as protection instead of punishment." Elena wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "Why are you telling me this? You could lie. Make it sound better than it is." "Because you deserve to know what you're getting into." His eyes were dark, serious. "Because if this continues, if you decide you want to keep seeing me, there will come a day when you'll hear things about me that scare you. When people will look at you differently because you're with me. When you'll have to decide if what we have is worth the cost of being connected to who I am." "That sounds like you're trying to talk me out of this." "I'm trying to be fair to you." Roman's voice went softer. "You've already been hurt by someone you trusted. I won't do that to you, not with lies, not with false promises, not by letting you believe this is something it's not." A woman jogged past, pushing a stroller. Regular life? Normal problems. Elena thought about Marcus, about how he'd smiled and lied and stolen everything while she'd believed every word. About how the betrayal had felt less like heartbreak and more like drowning. Then she thought about Roman, who'd known her for less than a week and had already been more honest than Marcus had been in 3 years. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "You should be." "That's not helpful." "It's true." Roman set down his coffee. "I'm scared too, if that helps." Elena looked at him in surprise. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you." He gestured between them. "I don't do this. I don't date. I don't let people in. The last woman I was involved with was 5 years ago, and she tried to sell information about my business to the FBI when I ended things." His jaw tightened. "I learned to keep my distance, to keep everything transactional, safer that way." "Then why aren't you keeping your distance now?" Roman was quiet for so long Elena thought he might not answer. "Because when you walked into that coffee shop," he said finally, "you looked like you were carrying the weight of the whole world and trying to do it quietly so no one would notice. And I recognize that. I've been carrying weight my whole life, and everyone just assumes I'm strong enough to handle it because I don't complain." He paused. You're the first person in years who didn't look at me and see power or money or connections. You just saw someone who stayed too long in a coffee shop, and that made me want to know you." Elena's throat was tight. "I'm not special." "Yes, you are. I'm a mess. I work part-time at a bookstore. I can barely afford rent. I spend most of my time hiding from the world because it's easier than risking getting hurt again. And somehow," Roman said quietly, "you still found the courage to text me, to sit here having this conversation, to give me a chance even though everything in your history tells you not to." He turned to face her fully. "That's not being a mess, Elena. That's being brave." She didn't feel brave. She felt terrified. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I say yes to whatever this is, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't lie to me. Even if the truth is ugly, even if you think it'll hurt me, I can handle pain. I can't handle being lied to again." Roman held her gaze. "I promise. And if this gets too dangerous, if being with you puts me at risk, you have to tell me. You don't get to decide what risks I can handle. That's my choice. All right? And you can't just fix my problems with money or power or whatever it is you do. I'm not a project. I'm a person." Something shifted in Roman's expression. Relief, maybe, or respect. "Understood." Elena took a deep breath. "Okay. Okay? Okay. I want to keep seeing you. I want to try this. I don't know if I'm being brave or stupid, but I want to see where this goes." Roman didn't smile, but his whole body seemed to relax slightly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a chance I probably don't deserve." They sat in the park for another hour, talking about small things. Elena told him about the bookstore, about her favorite regulars, about the woman who came in every Tuesday looking for romance novels with happy endings. Roman told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about learning the business from the ground up, about the strange isolation of being someone people feared. It felt easy, normal, like they were just two people getting to know each other, not a mafia boss and a woman trying to rebuild her life from ruins. When Roman drove her home, he walked her to her door again. In the dingy hallway that smelled like curry and old carpet, he looked absurdly out of place in his expensive clothes. "Can I take you to dinner again?" he asked. "Somewhere less intense this time. Maybe somewhere you pick." Elena thought about it. "There's a Thai place 2 blocks from here. It's cheap and kind of grimy, but the food is incredible." Roman's mouth curved slightly. "When?" "Thursday? I'll meet you there at 7. He didn't try to kiss her, just waited until she was inside her apartment, then left. Elena watched from her window as he got into his car and drove away, and felt something unfamiliar uncurl in her chest. Hope. She was going to regret this. She knew that with the certainty of someone who'd learned not to trust good things. But for now, just for tonight, she let herself have it. Thursday arrived faster than Elena expected. She spent her shift at the bookstore distracted, reorganizing the same shelf 3 times before her manager, Denise, noticed. "You okay?" Denise asked. She was in her 50s, sturdy and kind, with reading glasses on a chain and an impressive collection of cat-themed sweaters. "Fine. Just tired." "You look nervous." Elena gave up on the shelf. "I have a date tonight." Denise's eyebrows shot up. "Really? With who?" "Someone I met last week. It's new, very new." "Good, new, or scary new?" "Both." Denise studied her for a moment. "You haven't dated since that asshole Marcus disappeared. This is good. You deserve something good." Elena wished she felt as certain about that. The Thai restaurant was called Sticky Rice, and it was exactly as grimy as promised. Fluorescent lights, plastic tablecloths, a menu that had been laminated so many times it was starting to peel at the edges. Elena arrived 10 minutes early out of sheer nerves and ordered water she didn't drink. Roman walked in at exactly 7, wearing jeans and a dark sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but looked casual enough that he didn't stand out too badly. Several people turned to look at him anyway, because apparently even in street clothes he radiated danger. He slid into the seat across from her. "This is perfect." "It's a dump. It's real." He picked up a menu. "What's good?" "Everything, but get the pad see ew and the crying tiger beef. Trust me." They ordered. The waiter, a teenager who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, took their order with impressive disinterest and disappeared. "So," Roman said, "tell me something you've never told anyone else." Elena blinked. "That's an intense dinner question." "We don't have time for small talk. I want to know you." She twisted her napkin. "Okay. When I was 12, I wanted to be a writer. I filled notebooks with stories. My English teacher said I had talent." She paused. "Marcus found the notebooks when we were living together. He read them when I wasn't home and told me they were embarrassing, that I should be grateful I had a real job instead of wasting time on fantasies." Her voice went quiet. "I threw them all away. Every single notebook. And I've regretted it every day since." Roman's expression went cold. "He destroyed your work." "He destroyed my confidence." Elena looked down. "I haven't written anything since. Sometimes I think about it, but then I hear his voice telling me it's pointless, and I can't. That's what abuse does. It gets in your head and stays there even after the person is gone." Roman's voice was tight with controlled anger. "He didn't just steal your money, Elena. He stole part of who you are." "I let him." "No." The word came out sharp. "He manipulated you. That's not the same as you allowing it. Stop blaming yourself for someone else's cruelty." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "Your turn. Tell me something you've never told anyone." Roman was quiet for a long moment. The restaurant noise filled the silence. Kitchen sounds, other diners, traffic outside. "I almost left," he said finally. "The business, the family, all of it. 3 years ago, I had a plan. Fake my death, move overseas, start over somewhere no one knew my name." He paused. "I got as far as the airport before I turned around." "Why?" "Because I realized I was running from something I'd never tried to fix. My father built this organization on fear and violence, and I hated him for it. But instead of trying to change it, I was just going to abandon everyone who depended on me." He met her eyes. "I went back and started making different choices. Harder choices. It's not perfect. It'll never be legitimate. But it's better than what he left me." The food arrived. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the kind of comfortable quiet that felt earned rather than awkward. "This is really good," Roman said. "Told you." "You were right about a lot of things." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like the fact that I needed to meet someone who wasn't afraid to tell me the truth. Someone who sees me as a person instead of a position." He set down his fork. "Everyone in my world performs. They say what they think I want to hear. You tell me when I'm being an asshole. That's rare." "I haven't called you an asshole." "Not yet, but I have faith you will, when I deserve it." Elena almost smiled. "What happens now, with us? What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. I've never dated someone who—" She gestured vaguely. "Someone in your situation. My situation. You know what I mean." Roman leaned back slightly. "I want to keep seeing you. I want to take you to dinner and hear about your day and learn what makes you laugh. I want to know everything about you." He paused. "But I also need you to understand that my life is complicated. There will be nights I can't explain where I'm going, times I'll have to leave suddenly, people who will judge you for being with me." "People already judge me," Elena said quietly, "for being broke, for working at a bookstore with a graduate degree, for letting Marcus ruin my credit. I'm used to it. This will be different." "How?" "Because they'll think you're using me, gold digger, social climber, someone trying to get close to power." Roman's voice was matter-of-fact. "My family, especially. They'll see you as a threat or a distraction. They won't be kind." Elena's stomach clenched. "Have you told them about me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I wanted to see if this was real first, if you were someone worth fighting for." He held her gaze. "You are." But the weight of that statement settled between them. "I'm not ready to meet your family," Elena said. "Good. I'm not ready to subject you to them yet." They finished dinner. Roman paid despite Elena's protest, and they walked out into the cool evening air. The street was busy, people heading home from work, delivery drivers double-parked, the constant hum of city life. "Walk with me?" Roman asked. They walked aimlessly, no destination in mind. Elena found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it. Their shoulders brushed occasionally. Roman's presence beside her felt solid, safe. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a few blocks. "Always." "Do you ever wish you had a normal life? Regular job, regular problems, no looking over your shoulder?" Roman thought about it. "Sometimes. Usually around 3 in the morning when I can't sleep." He glanced at her. "But then I think about what I've built, the people I employ who can't work anywhere else, the businesses I protect from predators worse than me, the fact that I've kept my territory clean of drugs and trafficking." He paused. "It's not legal, it's not safe, but it matters. And I don't know if I could give that up for normal. That's honest. I promised you honesty." They ended up back at her building somehow, the walk looping them through the neighborhood without Elena quite noticing. She stopped at the entrance, not ready to go inside yet. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Thank you for picking somewhere real. When can I see you again?" Roman's expression softened. "Whenever you want." Elena pulled out her phone. "Give me your number, your actual number, not just the business card one." He rattled off digits. She typed them in, hit save, and immediately sent him a text. "This is my real number, too." His phone buzzed. He checked it, and something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "Elena," he said quietly, "can I kiss you?" Her heart stopped. "Yes." He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her face. His palm was warm, calloused, gentle. He gave her time to pull away, to change her mind, to panic. She didn't. When his lips met hers, it wasn't desperate or demanding. It was careful, patient, like he was learning her. Elena's hands came up to grip his sweater, anchoring herself, and she kissed him back with all the confused want she'd been trying to ignore for days. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "Good night," Roman said, his voice rougher than before. "Good night." She made herself walk inside, made herself climb the stairs, made herself unlock her apartment door and go inside without looking back. But she stood at her window and watched until his car disappeared around the corner and admitted to herself that she was already in too deep to walk away now. Over the next 3 weeks, Elena fell into something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Roman called her every night, usually late, when his work was done. They talked about everything and nothing. Her favorite books, his complicated relationship with his mother, the stray cat that had started hanging around the bookstore, his opinions on terrible action movies. He listened like every word mattered, made her laugh with dry observations about people in his world, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. They saw each other when they could. Coffee before her morning shifts, late dinners at quiet restaurants. One Sunday afternoon in a museum where Roman surprised her by knowing way too much about Renaissance art. "My father believed a good boss should be educated," he explained, standing in front of a Caravaggio. "He made me study history, literature, art, said it taught you about power." "What did you learn?" "That powerful people have always been violent. They just frame it differently depending on the century." It should have been depressing. Somehow, in Roman's quiet voice, it just sounded true. Elena started writing again. Nothing serious, just scraps of scenes in a notebook she kept hidden in her nightstand. She didn't tell Roman, wasn't ready for that vulnerability yet, but it felt like reclaiming something Marcus had taken from her. Everything was going well, which meant, inevitably, everything was about to fall apart. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning when Elena arrived at the bookstore to find Denise waiting with her arms crossed and an expression that meant trouble. "We need to talk," Denise said before Elena could even put down her bag. Elena's stomach dropped. "Am I being let go?" "What? No. But someone came in yesterday asking about you." "Who?" "Didn't give a name. Older woman, expensive clothes, looked like she'd never set foot in a place like this before." Denise pulled out her phone and showed Elena a screenshot from the security camera. "She spent 20 minutes browsing, asked when you worked, then bought a book and left. Paid cash." Elena stared at the grainy image. The woman was in her 60s, perfectly put together, with the kind of bone structure that suggested serious money and the posture of someone used to being obeyed. "I don't know her," Elena said slowly. "Well, she knows you, or knows about you." Denise's expression softened. "Look, I don't know what you're mixed up in, and I'm not asking. But be careful. okay? That woman looked like she could cause problems. Elena's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and texted Roman. Someone came to my work asking about me. Older woman, need to talk. His response came within seconds. I'm coming to get you. I need to leave, Elena said. Denise waved her off. Go. We're slow anyway. Roman's car pulled up 15 minutes later. Elena practically ran to it, her heart hammering. She got in and Roman took one look at her face before pulling into traffic. Tell me everything, he said. She explained about the woman, about Denise's warning, about the careful way the stranger had asked questions without revealing why she cared. Roman's jaw tightened with each detail. It's my mother, he said finally. Elena felt cold. What? That description, the way she operates, it's her. Roman's hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles went white. She must have had someone following me. Found out about you. Why would she do that? Because she's Victoria DeLuca, and she doesn't believe in boundaries. His voice was tight with controlled fury. Because she thinks she has a right to control every aspect of my life, including who I see. What does she want? To assess you, to figure out if you're a threat or an opportunity or just someone she needs to scare away. Roman glanced at her. I'm sorry. I should have warned you this might happen. You said your family wouldn't be kind. You didn't say they'd show up at my job. I know. I'm handling it. How? Roman didn't answer, just drove in tight silence until they reached a building Elena didn't recognize, glass and steel, expensive, the kind of place that required security badges. He pulled into underground parking and killed the engine. Where are we? Elena asked. My office. It's secure. She won't come here. He turned to face her. I need to make some calls, deal with this, but I need you safe first. I'm not in danger from your mother. You don't know her. They took an elevator to the top floor. The office was exactly what Elena expected. Modern, minimalist, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A desk that looked like it cost more than her yearly salary. Everything clean and sharp and designed to intimidate. Roman's assistant appeared immediately. A man in his 40s with watchful eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen combat. Boss? Michael. I need the room secured. No one in or out without my approval. And find out who my mother has on surveillance detail. I want names and locations within the hour. Michael nodded and disappeared. Elena sank into a leather chair that probably cost more than her rent. This is really your life? Yes. Roman was already on his phone typing rapidly. I told you it was complicated. Complicated is forgetting to pay a parking ticket. This is... She gestured around. This is something else. He made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, each conversation brief and conducted in a language Elena didn't recognize. Italian, maybe. His voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath it, the tone of someone giving orders they expected to be followed. When he finished, he sat down across from her and rubbed his face tiredly. I'm pulling the surveillance, he said. My mother will know I know and she'll be angry, but she won't approach you directly again, not without going through me first. Why is she doing this? Because I haven't introduced you. Because you're not from our world. Because she's probably terrified I'm going to do something stupid, like fall in love with someone she hasn't vetted and approved. Roman's voice went bitter. She spent my entire life trying to control who I become. This is just another version of that. Elena absorbed that. Are you? Falling in love with me? The question hung in the air between them. Roman looked at her directly, and something in his expression made her chest tight. Yes, he said quietly. I am, which terrifies me because I don't know how to protect you from this world while also letting you be part of my life. Elena's breath caught. Roman? You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I just need you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not casual for me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And that means my mother is going to see you as a threat to her influence over me, which makes you a target. I don't want to be a target. I know. I'm sorry. They sat in silence. Outside the windows, the city sprawled in every direction, indifferent to their problems. What happens now? Elena asked finally. Now I have dinner with my mother and make it very clear that you're off limits, that if she comes near you again, there will be consequences. Roman's voice was cold. And then I give you a choice. What choice? Whether you want to keep doing this, because it's only going to get harder from here. Once my family knows about you, once word spreads in my world, you'll be scrutinized, judged. People will make assumptions about who you are and what you want from me. He met her eyes. I can protect you from physical danger, but I can't protect you from gossip or cruelty or the social cost of being with me. Elena thought about Marcus, about how he'd isolated her, controlled her, made her feel small, about how she'd promised herself she'd never let anyone have that much power over her life again. But this was different. Roman wasn't trying to control her. He was giving her information, letting her choose. I need time, she said, to think about this, about what I'm willing to risk. Of course. Roman stood and pulled out his wallet, extracting a key card. Stay here as long as you need. Michael will make sure you have anything you want. When you're ready to leave, he'll take you home. Where are you going? To have dinner with my mother. His expression was grim. This should be enjoyable. He left before Elena could respond. She sat alone in his massive office, surrounded by expensive furniture and the weight of impossible choices, and tried to figure out what she wanted. The truth was, she was falling for Roman too. Had been falling since that first coffee shop conversation, since he'd listened to her like she mattered, since he'd been honest when dishonesty would have been easier. But love and safety weren't the same thing, and Elena had learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it good for you. She pulled out her phone and called the one person who might understand. Marissa, it's Elena. Do you have time to talk? Marissa arrived at Roman's office an hour later, breathless and wide-eyed. This is where he works? Elena, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? They sat in the conference room. Michael had appeared with coffee and pastries and a polite assurance that they'd have complete privacy, and Elena told her everything. The blind date, Roman's honesty about his business, the growing relationship, and now his mother's surveillance. Marissa listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, concern, and something that might have been grudging respect. Okay, she said when Elena finished. First of all, I feel like I should apologize because this is technically my fault for setting up that blind date. It's not your fault. It's a little my fault. But also, Marissa leaned forward. Elena, I've known you for 3 years. In that time, I have watched you make yourself as small and invisible as possible. You apologize for existing. You take the worst shifts, you never ask for raises, you date men who treat you like background noise. She paused. This is the first time I've seen you look alive. Scared, yes, but alive. Elena's throat was tight. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. Maybe not, but maybe good ideas are overrated. Marissa picked at a croissant. The question isn't whether this is risky. It's whether he's worth the risk. I don't know. Yes, you do. You wouldn't have called me if you didn't already know the answer. Elena thought about Roman's careful honesty, about the way he listened, about how he'd never once made her feel stupid or weak or less than enough. His world is dangerous, she said quietly. Your world was pretty dangerous too when Marcus destroyed your credit and disappeared. At least Roman is honest about the danger. That's a low bar. It's a start. Marissa reached across the table and took Elena's hand. Look, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you're stronger than you think you are. And if this man makes you feel seen and valued and brave enough to take risks again, that matters. That's not nothing. Elena squeezed her friend's hand, grateful beyond words. They talked for another hour, Marissa asking careful questions about Roman's family, his business, his promises. When she finally left, Elena felt marginally less terrified. Michael appeared in the doorway. Miss Vale, Mr. DeLuca asked me to drive you home when you're ready. Actually, Elena said slowly, can you take me somewhere else first? 20 minutes later, she stood outside an Italian restaurant in a neighborhood that screamed old money. Through the windows, she could see Roman sitting at a corner table with a woman who had to be his mother. Elegant, imperious, currently speaking with animated anger while Roman sat perfectly still. Elena's hands were shaking. This was stupid, impulsive, probably a terrible idea. She walked inside anyway. The hostess tried to stop her. Do you have a reservation? but Elena walked past her toward Roman's table with the kind of desperate courage that came from knowing if she stopped to think she'd lose her nerve. Roman saw her first. His eyes went wide, then concerned, then something else Elena couldn't quite name. His mother turned to see what he was looking at, and her expression went cold. "Sorry to interrupt," Elena said, her voice shaking only slightly. "But I needed to say something." "Elena," Roman started to stand. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." She turned to his mother. "Mrs. DeLuca, I'm Elena Vale. I'm sure you already know that since you had someone follow your son to find out about me, and I'm sure you're here to convince him I'm wrong for him, that I'm some gold digger or social climber or whatever story you've already decided is true." Victoria DeLuca's expression didn't change. "Miss Vale, how presumptuous of you to assume you know what I think." "I don't care what you think." Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. "I care that you came to my workplace, that you investigated me without having the courage to just ask Roman about me, that you're trying to control his life like he's still a child instead of a grown man who gets to make his own choices." "Elena," Roman's voice held warning, "this isn't necessary." "Yes, it is." She kept her eyes on Victoria. "I'm not after his money. I didn't even know who he was when we met. I have my own problems, my own life, my own reasons for being careful about who I trust. Your son has been nothing but honest and respectful with me. He told me about his business, about his family, about the risks of being with him. And I'm still here because I care about him, not because of what he can give me." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Victoria set down her wine glass with deliberate care. "You have no idea what you're involving yourself in." "You're right, I don't. But that's not your decision to make." Elena's voice steadied. "If Roman wants me gone, he can tell me himself. But you don't get to decide who he loves or who loves him. That's not protecting him. That's controlling him. And from what he's told me about his father, I'd think you'd understand why that's a problem." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Roman stood slowly. "Mother, I think we're done here." Victoria looked between them, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up her purse with movements so controlled they looked choreographed. "We'll continue this conversation later," she said to Roman. To Elena, she added, "You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Vale." "Probably both," Elena admitted. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Victoria's face, there and gone so quickly Elena might have imagined it. She left without another word, her exit drawing every eye in the restaurant. Elena's legs felt like water. She sat down hard in the chair Victoria had vacated. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever done," she said. Roman was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "That was incredible." "I just told off your mother in a public restaurant." "I know." He reached across the table and took her hand. "No one's ever done that before. She's going to hate you forever." "Great. That's exactly what I was going for." "Elena." Roman's voice was soft. "Why did you come here?" She took a shaky breath. "Because I realized something while I was sitting in your office trying to decide if this was worth the risk. I've spent the last year hiding, making myself small, being afraid of everything." She looked at him directly. "But I'm more afraid of being that person forever than I am of whatever your family or your world might do to me. So yes, I want to keep doing this. I want to be with you. Even if it's hard, even if it's scary, even if your mother hates me." Roman's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "She doesn't hate you. She looked like she wanted to murder me. That's her resting face. Trust me, if she actually wanted to murder you, you'd know." His expression went serious. "But Elena, you need to understand what you just did. My mother doesn't forgive public challenges. She's going to test you now, push boundaries, try to prove you're not strong enough for this. Then I'll prove her wrong. You might not be able to. This world, my world, it's designed to break people who don't belong. I've seen it happen." His grip tightened. "I don't want to watch it happen to you." Elena thought about Marcus, about how he'd slowly, methodically destroyed her confidence until she couldn't recognize herself anymore, about how she'd let it happen because she'd been too afraid to fight back. "I'm not going to break," she said quietly. "Not again. I learned my lesson the hard way. I know what it looks like when someone's trying to tear me down, and I know how to fight back now." Roman studied her face for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "All right, we do this together, but you have to promise me something." "What?" "If it gets too much, if my family or my world starts destroying the parts of you I love, you'll tell me. You'll be honest. You won't just endure it because you think you're supposed to be strong enough. I promise if you promise the same thing. If I'm making your life harder, if I'm a liability to your business, if being with me causes problems you can't solve, you tell me. You don't just try to protect me from the truth." Deal. They left the restaurant together, Roman's hand warm and solid against her back. Outside, the evening air was cool and smelled like rain. "Where do we go from here?" Elena asked. "I don't know. Usually when someone confronts my mother in public, there's a violent retaliation." Roman's tone was dry. "But you're a civilian, so she'll probably just make your life miserable in creative ways." "That's comforting." "I'm joking. Mostly." He pulled her closer. "She'll want to have dinner with us, test you properly, ask invasive questions, and watch how you handle pressure." Elena's stomach clenched. "When?" "Soon. She doesn't believe in giving people time to prepare." He paused. "But before that happens, I want you to meet someone else first." "Who?" "My sister, Lucia." Roman's expression softened slightly. "She's the only person in my family who isn't completely terrible. She'll like you." "How do you know?" "Because she hates everyone my mother approves of, and my mother clearly doesn't approve of you. That makes you automatically interesting." They walked for a few blocks in comfortable silence, the city lights reflecting off puddles from an earlier rain. Elena felt simultaneously exhausted and energized, terrified and certain. "Thank you," Roman said quietly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to walk into that restaurant, for standing up to my mother, for choosing this even though you shouldn't." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "For choosing me." Elena reached up and cupped his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under her palm. "Thank you for being honest, for not trying to protect me by lying, for trusting me to make my own choices." He kissed her then, right there on the sidewalk with people walking past and car horns blaring and the whole messy city watching. It was deeper than their previous kisses, more desperate, like he was trying to communicate something words couldn't contain. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was breathless. "Take me home?" she asked. Roman's eyes darkened. "Yours or mine?" The question held weight. Elena's apartment was small and shabby and safe. Roman's place, wherever that was, would be another step deeper into his world. "Yours," she said. They drove to a building Elena had passed 100 times without really seeing it. Historic brownstone converted into luxury condos. The kind of place that didn't have numbers on the doors because if you belonged there, you already knew where you were going. Roman's apartment was on the top floor, hardwood floors, exposed brick, windows overlooking the park. It was beautiful and masculine and somehow felt more personal than his office. "This is where you live," Elena said, walking slowly through the space. "Yes." "Does it bother you?" "No, it's just so different from my place." "Your place feels like home. This feels like somewhere I sleep between emergencies." Roman shrugged out of his jacket. "Would you like something to drink?" "Water's fine." He disappeared into the kitchen. Elena wandered to the windows, looking out at the city sprawling below. From up here, everything looked orderly, controlled. Nothing like the chaos of actual life. Roman returned with 2 glasses of water and sat on the couch. Elena joined him, curling into his side. He wrapped an arm around her and she felt some of the day's tension drain away. "Your mother is going to make my life hell, isn't she?" Elena said. "Probably. And your family will think I'm using you." "Definitely. And people in your world will see me as a weakness they can exploit." "Almost certainly." Roman's voice was grim. "I can't promise this will be easy, Elena. I can only promise I'll be here, that I'll protect you as much as you'll let me, that I won't let them break us without a fight." Elena thought about that, about promises and protection and the difference between the two. "I don't need you to fight my battles," she said quietly, "but I need to know you'll stand beside me while I fight them myself. Always." They sat in silence, the city lights twinkling below. Elena felt Roman's heart beating steady under her ear and made herself a promise. She wouldn't let his world destroy her, wouldn't let his family make her feel small, wouldn't become another casualty of loving someone dangerous. She'd survived Marcus. She'd survived losing everything. She could survive this too. But first she had to meet his sister, and then his mother properly, in whatever formal dinner setting Victoria De Luca deemed appropriate for testing the woman her son had chosen. Elena closed her eyes and tried not to think about how many ways that could go wrong. "Stay tonight?" Roman asked quietly. Elena lifted her head to look at him. Yes. They didn't sleep together, not in that way. Elena wasn't ready for that yet, and Roman didn't push. But they fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Elena felt safe. Morning came too quickly. Elena woke to find Roman already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. "Nothing. You just—" He stopped, started again. "You look peaceful when you sleep. It's nice to see you not carrying everything." Elena sat up, suddenly self-conscious. "I should get home. I have a shift at noon." "I'll drive you." They didn't talk much on the drive back to her apartment. Elena was thinking about the coming confrontations, about meeting Lucia, about the formal dinner with Victoria, about all the ways this could still fall apart. Roman walked her to her door like he always did. In the dingy hallway, he looked absurdly out of place again. "Lucia wants to meet you tomorrow," he said. "Coffee. Somewhere neutral. Just the three of us." "Okay." "She's going to interrogate you. Fair warning. Is she as terrifying as your mother?" "Different kind of terrifying. Less controlled, more direct." Roman smiled slightly. "You'll like her." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." He kissed her goodbye, soft and sweet, and Elena watched him leave before going inside. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, shabbier, more obviously inadequate. She looked around at her second-hand furniture and water-stained ceiling and felt the familiar shame creeping back. Then she remembered standing in that restaurant, confronting Victoria De Luca, and the shame transformed into something else. Pride, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. She pulled out her notebook and started writing. The coffee shop Roman chose for meeting Lucia was aggressively hipster. Exposed Edison bulbs, reclaimed wood tables, a chalkboard menu featuring drinks with names like The Existential Crisis and Lavender Dreams. Elena arrived 10 minutes early because punctuality was one of the few things she could control, and found Roman already there, sitting at a corner table with a woman who had to be his sister. Lucia De Luca looked nothing like what Elena expected. Where Roman was all controlled elegance and carefully maintained distance, Lucia was sharp angles and restless energy. Dark hair cut in an asymmetrical bob, leather jacket over a band t-shirt, rings on every finger. She looked like she fronted a punk band or ran an underground art gallery, not like someone from one of the city's most powerful crime families. She also looked at Elena like she was a specimen under a microscope. "So you're the one who told my mother to fuck off in public," Lucia said before Elena had even sat down. "I like you already." Elena blinked. "I didn't exactly." "Close enough." Lucia pushed a cup across the table. "I ordered you a latte. Roman said you take it with cream and sugar, which is adorable in a I still believe in sweetness kind of way." Elena sat down carefully. Roman's expression was amused. "Lucia's social skills are an acquired taste," he said. "Lucia's social skills are honest, which is more than most people in our family can claim." Lucia leaned back in her chair, studying Elena with dark eyes that were eerily similar to Roman's. "So, let me get the awkward questions out of the way. Are you after his money?" "No." "His connections?" "No." "Are you going to try to change him? Make him leave the family business? Turn him into some reformed criminal project?" Elena met her gaze steadily. "No, I don't want to change him. I just want to know him." Lucia's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "Good answer. Last girlfriend spent 6 months trying to convince him to go legitimate. It ended badly. She also tried to turn federal witness," Roman added dryly. "So her motives were questionable." "Details," Lucia waved a hand dismissively. "Point is, Roman doesn't do relationships. Hasn't in years. Then suddenly, he's calling me at midnight talking about some woman he met at a coffee shop, and I'm thinking, oh, great, he's having a crisis. But then he keeps talking about you and keeps talking, and I realized this wasn't a crisis. This was something else entirely. Elena's cheeks heated. She glanced at Roman, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. You talk about me, she asked quietly. Occasionally, Roman said, which Elena suspected meant constantly. Lucia grinned. He's obsessed. It's embarrassing. I've known my brother for 29 years, and I've never seen him like this. Her expression sobered. Which means I need to know you're not going to destroy him. That's not really how destruction works in this scenario, Elena said. I'm the bookstore clerk dating a mafia boss. If anyone's getting destroyed, it's probably me. Maybe. But emotional destruction is just as bad as the physical kind. Roman spent his whole life building walls to protect himself from people who want to use him. If you get inside those walls and then burn everything down, I'll make your life very unpleasant. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it just sounded like someone protecting family. I don't want to hurt him, Elena said, but I can't promise I won't. People hurt each other. It's what happens when you let someone matter. Lucia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I can work with that level of honesty. She turned to Roman. She's better than I expected. Mother's going to hate her. Mother already hates her. Even better. Lucia pulled out her phone. Speaking of which, the formal dinner is set for Friday night. 8 p.m., the estate. Full family attendance mandatory, which means Uncle Tomas and Aunt Bianca will be there, and they're going to be insufferable. She looked at Elena. Fair warning, Tomas thinks any woman Roman dates is either a whore or an idiot, usually both. Don't let him get in your head. Elena's stomach clenched. How many people will be there? 10? Maybe 12? Immediate family plus key associates. Lucia's expression softened slightly. It's going to be brutal. They're going to ask invasive questions, make cutting remarks, and generally try to prove you don't belong. Roman will protect you as much as he can, but there are things he can't defend you from without looking weak. Like what? Like implications about your motives, suggestions that you're using him, questions about your background designed to make you feel inferior. Lucia leaned forward. Here's what you need to know. They're going to treat this like a job interview for a position you didn't apply for. Your job is to be yourself, not apologetic, not performing, just honest and unimpressed by their bullshit. That's asking a lot, Elena said quietly. I know, but it's the only thing that works with this family. The moment you start performing or trying to prove you're good enough, they smell weakness and go for the throat. Lucia glanced at Roman. Tell her about Cousin Marco's last girlfriend. She lasted 20 minutes before she started crying and left, Roman said. She was perfectly nice, just not equipped for sustained emotional warfare. Elena felt sick. Maybe I shouldn't go. No. Roman's voice was firm. You're going, because if you don't, they'll think I'm ashamed of you or that you're not strong enough. And then they'll never stop pushing. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'll be right there. Lucia will be there. You won't be alone in this. Your mother wanted me investigated and surveilled. Now she wants me at a formal dinner. What's the end game here? Lucia and Roman exchanged a look. She's testing whether you break, Lucia said bluntly. If you survive dinner without falling apart or revealing yourself to be a fortune hunter or otherwise proving you're unsuitable, she'll move to phase 2. Which is? Trying to buy you off? Offering you money to disappear? When that doesn't work, and I'm assuming it won't, she'll move to phase 3, which is making your life so uncomfortable that you leave on your own. Elena pulled her hand back from Roman's. And you're all just okay with this? This is normal? No, Roman said quietly. It's not okay, and it's not normal. But it's what happens when you're part of this family. Everyone who comes into our world gets tested. Everyone. His eyes were dark, serious. I'm not asking you to accept it. I'm asking you to survive it, and then we figure out what comes next. Elena looked between the two siblings. Roman's carefully controlled concern, Lucia's blunt assessment. She thought about walking away, going back to her small, safe life, avoiding all of this. Then she thought about how that small, safe life had felt like suffocation, how Roman had made her feel seen for the first time in years, how she'd spent the last year hiding, and it hadn't made her any safer, just lonelier. "Okay," she said. "I'll go to dinner, but I need help." "What kind of help?" Lucia asked. "I need to know what to wear, how to act, what the rules are." Elena's voice was steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "You said be myself, but I don't know how to be myself in that environment. I need a translator." Lucia's expression shifted to something like respect. "Smart. Asking for help instead of pretending you know what you're doing." She pulled out her phone and started typing. "Friday morning, my place. We'll go through everything. Clothes, etiquette, who's who, what topics to avoid. Think of it as battle preparation." "That's a terrifying metaphor." "It's an accurate one." Lucia stood. "I need to go." "But Elena, you did good today. Most people meeting me for the first time either try too hard to impress me or treat me like a potential threat. You just talked to me like a person. That's rare in our world." She left before Elena could respond, her leather jacket disappearing into the crowd of aggressively casual coffee drinkers. Roman moved to sit beside Elena instead of across from her. "You okay?" "No, I'm terrified." "Good. Terror means you understand what you're walking into." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "But you don't have to do this. We can figure out another way." "What other way?" "Your family needs to know I exist. Running from this dinner just delays the inevitable." Elena leaned into him. "I'm tired of running from things, even things that scare me." They sat in silence for a while, the coffee shop noise washing over them. Elena tried to imagine herself at a formal dinner with Roman's family, tried to picture holding her own against people bred for combat of the social variety. The image wouldn't come into focus. "Tell me about them," she said finally. "Your family? Not the scary parts, the human parts." Roman was quiet for a moment, gathering thoughts. "Uncle Tomas is my father's brother. He resented that my father took over the family business instead of him, and he resents me for inheriting it. He drinks too much and says cruel things, but he's smart about business and loyal when it matters." That's not exactly comforting. Aunt Bianca is his wife. She married into the family for status and spent 30 years regretting it. She's miserable, which she expresses by making everyone around her miserable. She'll comment on your clothes, your posture, your background, anything she can find to establish her superiority. This keeps getting better. Cousin Marco is their son. He's 26, arrogant, thinks he should be running things instead of me. He'll either hit on you to prove he can, or insult you to prove you're not worth my time. Possibly both. Elena's head was starting to hurt. "Anyone nice?" "Lucia. And my mother in her own way when she's not being terrifying. She actually has principles. Twisted ones, but principles." Roman paused. "And there will be some associates there, people who work for me, who owe me loyalty. They won't say much, but they'll be watching to see how you handle yourself. So no pressure. None at all." His tone was dry. He pulled her closer. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to surprise them. You surprised my mother. You surprised Lucia. You keep surprising me. By being a disaster. By being brave when you think you're being a coward. By speaking up when most people would stay silent. By choosing to fight instead of hide." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That's not disaster. That's strength." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel as capable as he seemed to think she was. Instead, she just felt small and scared and completely out of her depth. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of anxiety. Elena worked her shifts at the bookstore, went through the motions of normal life, and tried not to think about Friday. At night, she lay awake running through worst-case scenarios, each one more catastrophic than the last. Friday morning arrived with rain that matched her mood. Elena stood outside in a dress in a neighborhood she couldn't afford, checking and rechecking the text from Lucia to make sure she had the right place. The building was converted warehouse lofts, the kind of space that came with high ceilings and higher rent. She buzzed apartment 4C, and Lucia's voice crackled through the speaker. "Come on up, door's unlocked." Lucia's apartment was exactly what Elena expected. Exposed brick, vintage furniture, walls covered in art that ranged from beautiful to deliberately ugly. A gray cat watched Elena from the back of the couch with supreme indifference. "Coffee?" Lucia asked, already pouring a cup. "Please." They sat at a wooden table covered in fashion magazines and fabric swatches. Lucia pushed several dresses toward Elena. I pulled some options from my closet. We're similar sizes. Try them on, and we'll see what works. Elena looked at the dresses. Elegant, expensive, nothing like anything she owned. I can't borrow these. Why not? Because if I spill something or rip something, then I'll buy another one. Elena, stop thinking like someone who can't afford to make mistakes. Tonight you're walking into that dinner as Roman's partner. You need to look like you belong there, even if you don't feel like it. Lucia's tone softened. Fake it until you make it isn't just a saying, it's survival strategy. Elena tried on 4 dresses. The first was too formal, the second too revealing, the third made her look washed out. The fourth was simple but stunning, dark blue, fitted but not tight, with a neckline that was modest without being prudish. That one? Lucia said immediately. It says I didn't spend 3 hours preparing for this, but I still look better than everyone else. Perfect. They spent the next 2 hours going over everything. Names, faces, relationships, business dynamics. Lucia drew a seating chart and explained who would sit where, who to avoid making eye contact with, who might actually be friendly. Tomas will try to goad Roman into an argument, Lucia explained. Don't react. Just let Roman handle it. If Tomas speaks to you directly, be polite but brief. Don't give him ammunition. What kind of ammunition? Anything. Your job, your education, your family background. He'll twist whatever you say to make it sound inadequate or suspicious. Lucia made a note on the seating chart. Bianca will compliment you in ways that are actually insults. Things like, how refreshing to see someone so natural, which means you look cheap, or I admire your confidence, which means you're inappropriately dressed. Elena's anxiety was reaching new heights. How do I respond to that? Thank her sincerely, like you didn't catch the insult. It pisses her off more than arguing would. Lucia grinned. I've been doing it for years. It's very satisfying. Patrim. They went through conversational scenarios, practiced responses, discussed safe topics and dangerous ones. Lucia was a surprisingly good teacher, direct, honest, willing to correct Elena without making her feel stupid. One more thing, Lucia said as Elena was getting ready to leave. My mother is going to ask about your intentions toward Roman. Not directly, she's too sophisticated for that. But she'll find a way to question whether this is real or transactional. What do I say? The truth. That you care about him, that you're not after his money or status, that you understand this is complicated, but you're willing to try. Lucia's expression was serious. Don't overpromise. Don't make declarations about forever. Just be honest about where you are right now. That's all anyone can ask. Elena nodded, throat tight with emotion. Thank you for helping me. You didn't have to. Yeah, I did. Roman's my brother. He spent years being lonely and calling it safety. You make him happy. That's worth protecting. Lucia walked her to the door. You're going to do fine tonight, and if you need to escape to the bathroom to hyperventilate, I'll cover for you. Elena left carrying the dress in a garment bag and feeling marginally more prepared, which still meant she was terrified, but at least now she was educated about exactly what she should be terrified of. Roman picked her up at 7. He was wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her car had, and his expression was tight with tension. You don't have to do this, he said for the 3rd time. Yes, I do. Stop giving me chances to back out. They drove in silence through neighborhoods that got progressively more expensive. The DeLuca estate was outside the city proper, a sprawling property behind iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. The house was exactly what Elena expected. Old money, tasteful, designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. Warm light spilled from tall windows. Other cars were already parked in the circular drive. Elena's hands were shaking. Roman noticed. He took one of her hands in both of his. Listen to me. You're stronger than they are. They just don't know it yet. I don't feel strong. Feeling strong and being strong aren't the same thing. You walked into a coffee shop for a blind date that didn't exist, and you stayed anyway. You gave someone like me a chance when every rational part of you said not to. You confronted my mother in public. You're here right now, instead of running. He lifted her hand to his lips. That's strength, Elena. That's courage. Don't forget that when they try to make you feel small. She took a shaky breath. Okay. Okay, let's do this before I lose my nerve. They walked to the front door together. Roman's hand was steady against her back, grounding her. The door opened before they could knock. revealing a woman Elena didn't recognize. Staff, probably, based on the formal uniform. Inside, the house was museum perfect. High ceilings, expensive art, furniture that looked like it belonged behind velvet ropes. Voices came from somewhere deeper in the house. "Last chance," Roman murmured. Elena squared her shoulders. "Stop trying to save me. Let's go." They walked through marble hallways into a formal dining room where Elena's worst fears crystallized into reality. The table was set for 12, crystal glasses catching candlelight, place settings that probably had rules Elena didn't know. And around that table, people turned to look at her with varying degrees of interest and hostility. Victoria De Luca sat at the head of the table in a dress that probably cost more than Elena's annual income. Her expression was perfectly neutral, which was somehow worse than obvious anger. "Roman," she said, "and Miss Vale, how kind of you to join us." The words were polite. The tone suggested Elena had already failed some invisible test. "Mother," Roman's voice was even, "thank you for the invitation." They took their seats, Roman on Victoria's right, Elena beside him. Lucia was across the table, offering Elena a small nod of encouragement. The man next to Victoria had to be Uncle Tomas, already on his second glass of wine and looking at Elena like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "So," Tomas said before Elena had even fully settled into her chair, "this is the famous Elena, the bookstore girl who thinks she can handle our world." Elena's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to make herself smaller, to prove she wasn't a threat. Instead, she remembered Lucia's advice. Be yourself. Be unimpressed. "I don't think I can handle your world," she said evenly. "I think I can handle Roman. The world is secondary." Tomas's eyebrows shot up. Across the table, Lucia hid a smile behind her napkin. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "An interesting distinction, Miss Vale." "It's the only one that matters to me, Mrs. De Luca." The room went very quiet. Then Victoria picked up her wine glass, and the spell broke. "Well, shall we begin?" Dinner was exactly as brutal as promised. The food was incredible, and Elena tasted none of it, too focused on navigating the conversational minefield. Tomas made pointed comments about the importance of family legacy. Bianca complimented Elena's dress in a tone that made it clear she found it lacking. Marco tried to flirt with her until Roman's expression went cold enough that even Marco's arrogance couldn't miss the warning. Through it all, Elena held her ground. She didn't apologize for her background, didn't pretend to be something she wasn't, didn't try to prove she belonged. She just answered questions honestly, deflected insults with polite confusion as if she hadn't caught them, and refused to be rattled. It was exhausting. By the time dessert arrived, Elena's jaw hurt from maintaining a pleasant expression. Victoria had been largely silent through dinner, watching, assessing. Now she set down her fork and looked directly at Elena. "Miss Vale, I'm curious. What exactly do you hope to gain from your relationship with my son?" The table went silent. Every eye turned to Elena. This was it. The moment Lucia had warned her about. Elena met Victoria's gaze without flinching. "I hope to gain a relationship with someone who treats me with respect. Someone who's honest with me. Someone who makes me feel like I matter." She paused. "I'm not after his money or his status or his connections. I have my own problems to solve. I just want to know him. That's all I've ever wanted." "How remarkably simple," Victoria said, and it was impossible to tell if that was approval or mockery. "Simple doesn't mean easy," Elena said quietly. "Nothing about this has been easy, but it's been worth it." Victoria studied her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she smiled. It was small, controlled, but genuine. "Well," she said, "perhaps you're not entirely unsuitable after all." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. The rest of dinner passed in slightly less hostile territory. Tomas made a few more cutting remarks that Elena ignored. Bianca looked disappointed that her insults hadn't landed. Marco sulked. And through it all, Roman's hand found Elena's under the table, squeezing gently. When dinner finally ended, people dispersed into other rooms for drinks and conversation. Elena escaped to the bathroom. An enormous marble affair with hand towels that were probably worth more than her rent, and let herself fall apart for exactly 3 minutes. She'd done it. She'd survived. A knock on the door made her jump. "Elena, it's Lucia." Elena opened the door. Lucia looked impressed. "You were perfect," Lucia said. Not too eager, not defensive, just honest. Even Mother was surprised. "I think I'm going to throw up." "Do it later. Right now we need to go back out there and make small talk for another hour before you can escape." "An hour? Leaving too early makes you look weak. Trust me, I've been doing this my whole life." Lucia linked her arm through Elena's. "Come on. I'll protect you from Uncle Tomas, and we can bond over how much we hate these dinners." They returned to the living room where people had separated into small groups. Roman was in the corner speaking with 2 men Elena recognized from Lucius's briefing, associates, lieutenants in his organization. He caught her eye, and some of the tension left his face. Elena spent the next hour making conversation with people who either ignored her or dissected every word she said. She talked about books with someone's bored wife, discussed the weather with an associate who clearly didn't care, and avoided Marco's continued attempts at flirtation. Finally, mercifully, Roman appeared at her elbow. "We're leaving," he said quietly. They made their goodbyes. Victoria accepted Elena's thanks with regal grace. Tomas ignored them entirely. Lucia gave Elena a hug and whispered, "You did great. Don't let them tell you otherwise." In the car driving away from the estate, Elena finally let herself breathe. "That was worse than I imagined," she said. "You handled it perfectly. I almost ran screaming in the middle of dessert." "But you didn't. That's what matters." Roman reached over and took her hand. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." "Are you? Sorry enough to spare me from the next family dinner?" "Unfortunately, surviving one means you get invited to all of them." His tone was rueful. "Welcome to the family, I guess." Elena leaned her head against the window and watched the city lights blur past. She'd survived. She'd held her ground. She'd proven, to Roman's family and to herself, that she was stronger than she looked. But the cost was starting to sink in. This was her life now. Formal dinners and hostile relatives and constant scrutiny, being tested and judged and found wanting by people who would never fully accept her. She'd chosen this. Chosen Roman. Chosen to fight instead of hide. She just hoped she was strong enough to keep choosing it when things got harder. Because something told her this was just the beginning. The beginning was simple enough that she didn't see the danger. 2 weeks after the family dinner, Elena received a letter at work. Heavy cream cardstock, her name written in elegant script, delivered by someone who didn't wait for a signature. Inside was an invitation to lunch with Victoria De Luca, just the 2 of them, at a restaurant Elena couldn't pronounce. She called Roman immediately. "Don't go," he said without hesitation. "I have to go. If I refuse, she'll think I'm afraid of her." "You should be afraid of her." Roman's voice was tight. "Elena, this isn't about getting to know you better. This is about something else. Let me find out what first." "No." Elena surprised herself with how steady she sounded. "I survived the family dinner. I can survive lunch with your mother." She heard him exhale slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." "She didn't invite you. She invited me." Elena looked at the invitation again, noting the date, 3 days away. "I need to handle this myself. Show her I'm not someone who needs constant protection." Roman was quiet for so long she thought the call had dropped. "All right," he said finally, "but you call me the second it's over. And if anything feels wrong, anything, you leave. Promise me." "I promise." The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu, where waiters appeared silently and disappeared like expensive ghosts. Victoria was already seated when Elena arrived, perfectly composed in cream and pearls, looking like she'd been born in establishments like this. "Miss Vale," Victoria said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming." Elena sat, acutely aware of her department store dress and second-hand purse. "Thank you for inviting me. Let's dispense with pleasantries, shall we? We both know this isn't a social call." Victoria's voice was pleasant, almost warm, which made Elena more nervous than hostility would have. "I wanted to speak with you privately about your relationship with my son." Here it comes, Elena thought, the buyout offer, the threats, whatever phase 2 looked like. "I'm listening," she said carefully. "Roman tells me you work at a bookstore, part-time. Minimum wage, I assume. Victoria didn't wait for an answer. And you live in that converted warehouse on Morrison Street. Studio apartment. Quite a step down from where you were before your former fiancé destroyed your finances. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. You investigated me again. Of course I did. You're involved with my son. I investigate everyone. Victoria picked up her menu. The question is whether you're involved with him or with his resources. And I've come to a conclusion. Elena's heart was pounding. Which is that you're sincere. Victoria looked up and her expression was unreadable. You genuinely care for Roman. You're not performing. You're not angling for money or status. You're just a woman who got hurt and is trying very hard not to get hurt again. I find that refreshing. Elena didn't know what to say. This wasn't going how she'd expected. However, Victoria continued, and there it was. Sincerity doesn't equal suitability. You have no understanding of our world, no experience with the kind of pressure Roman faces daily, no ability to navigate the social and political landscape he operates in. She paused. You survived one dinner by being honest and unimpressed. That won't work long term. Eventually, you'll need to understand power dynamics, alliances, threats. Can you honestly tell me you're capable of that? No, Elena said quietly. I can't. I have no idea if I'm capable of that. Victoria's eyebrows raised slightly, like she'd expected defensiveness. At least you're honest. That's all I know how to be. Elena met her gaze directly. I'm not from your world. I don't understand half of what happens in it. But I'm not stupid, and I'm not helpless. I learn fast, and I'm willing to try if Roman thinks I'm worth the effort. And if you fail? If you become a liability instead of an asset? Elena thought about that, about Marcus, about how she'd let him control and diminish her until she couldn't recognize herself, about the years she'd spent hiding and healing and promising herself she'd never be that small again. If I become a liability, I'll leave, she said. Not because you push me out, but because I won't let myself be someone Roman has to protect from his own life. I've been a burden before. I won't do that to him. Victoria studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then something in her expression shifted, not warmth exactly, but something close to respect. You're stronger than you look, she said finally. I wasn't certain before. I am now. The waiter appeared, took their orders, disappeared. Elena felt like she'd just survived a job interview she hadn't known she was taking. Miss Vale. Elena, I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anyone else. Victoria's voice went quieter. Roman's father was a brutal man, violent, unpredictable, cruel. He ruled through fear, and it destroyed him from the inside. By the time he went to prison, he barely resembled the man I'd married. She paused. Roman is not his father. He's spent years proving that, making different choices, building something better. But the world he inhabits doesn't reward gentleness. It punishes it. Elena's throat was tight. I don't understand what you're asking me. I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you that my son needs someone who makes him want to stay gentle instead of reverting to what his father taught him. Someone who reminds him why he chose a different path. Victoria's eyes were intense. You do that. I've watched him these past weeks. He's different with you, calmer, more human. She picked up her water glass. The question is whether you're strong enough to keep doing that when things get difficult. Because they will get difficult, Elena. Very soon. What do you mean? I mean there are people who see Roman's restraint as weakness. People who want what he's built. And they're going to test him, test his commitment to doing things differently than his father did. Victoria's voice was matter of fact. When that happens, he's going to need to make choices. Hard ones. And those choices will affect you directly. Elena felt cold. Are you trying to warn me or scare me away? Both, neither. Victoria shook her head slightly. I'm trying to prepare you for reality. Loving someone in our world means accepting that violence is always possible, that danger is constant, that the people you care about might have to do terrible things to protect what matters. She leaned forward. Can you live with that? Can you love someone capable of violence and still see them as good? Elena thought about Roman's careful honesty, about how he'd told her exactly who he was and what his world looked like. about how he'd never lied or prettied it up or asked her to accept something she didn't understand. I don't know, she said honestly. I've never had to before, but I'm willing to try. That's the best answer I have. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she did something Elena never expected. She smiled, genuinely smiled, and it transformed her entire face. That's good enough, she said. For now, that's good enough. They had lunch. They talked about books, about the city, about mundane things that had nothing to do with crime families or danger or power. By the time Elena left, she felt like she'd passed some invisible test she hadn't known existed. She called Roman from the sidewalk outside. How bad was it? He asked immediately. Weird. She was almost nice. She warned me about something coming, something that's going to test you. She told you about that? Roman sounded surprised. You knew? I've been handling it, trying to keep it away from you. He exhaled slowly. Can you come to my place tonight? There are things we need to talk about. Elena's stomach clenched. That sounds ominous. It's complicated, but you deserve to know what's happening. She took the train to his building, her mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. Roman met her at his door looking exhausted, still in his work clothes, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. Wine? He offered. Please. They sat on his couch with glasses neither of them drank from. Roman stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. There's a man named Viktor Kozlov, he said finally. He runs operations on the east side. Drugs, trafficking, loan sharking, everything my father used to do that I've refused to touch. He sees my restraint as weakness. He's been pushing into my territory, testing boundaries, trying to provoke a war. Elena's chest was tight. What does that mean? It means I've been trying to handle it diplomatically. Negotiation, compromise. Ways that don't end with people dead. Roman's voice was flat. But Kozlov doesn't respect diplomacy. He respects force. And he's starting to think I'm too soft to fight back. Are you? Roman looked at her directly. No, I've been choosing not to. That's different than being incapable. What happens if you fight back? People die, including potentially people on my side. And I become more like my father, solving problems with violence instead of strategy. He rubbed his face tiredly. But if I don't fight back, I look weak. Other people start pushing boundaries. Everything I've built falls apart. Elena set down her wine glass. Your mother said you'd have to make hard choices. This is what she meant. Yes, Roman turned to face her fully. And those choices affect you, because Kozlov knows about you now. He knows you matter to me, which makes you leverage. Fear spiked through her. Has he threatened me? Not directly, but he's had people watching you, following you to work, to your apartment, making sure I know he could get to you if he wanted to. Roman's expression went cold. I've had people protecting you without you knowing, but I can't keep doing that indefinitely. Eventually, something's going to break. Elena's hands were shaking. This was real. This wasn't theoretical danger or abstract threats. This was someone actively watching her, planning how to hurt Roman through her. What do I do? She whispered. That's up to you. Roman's voice gentled. You can walk away. I'll make sure you're safe. Make sure Kozlov knows you're not part of this anymore. You go back to your life, and I handle this my own way. Or you stay, and you trust me to protect you while I deal with this. But that means accepting that I might have to do things you don't want to know about, things that will remind you exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. Elena thought about Victoria's question. Can you love someone capable of violence and still see them as good? I don't want to be the reason you become your father, she said quietly. Roman flinched like she'd hit him. You're not, but I could be. If you do violent things to protect me, if you compromise who you're trying to be because someone's using me as leverage, that makes me responsible. That's not how this works. Isn't it? Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. Roman, I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in years, but I can't be the person who breaks your principles. I can't be the weakness that forces you to become something you don't want to be. Roman reached for her hands, holding them tightly. You're not a weakness. You're the strongest person I know, and you're not forcing me to do anything. These are my choices, my world, my problems to solve. But I'm part of them now. Yes, Because I made you part of them by falling in love with you. His voice cracked slightly. I should have been stronger, should have kept my distance, should have protected you by never getting close in the first place. But I was selfish. I wanted you too much to do the smart thing. Elena pulled her hands away. She stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights blurring through her tears. I need time, she said, to think about this. About whether I'm strong enough for this life. Whether loving you is worth potentially watching you become someone else to keep me safe. How much time? I don't know, a few days? A week, maybe? She turned to face him. But Roman, you need to handle the Kozlov situation. Not for me. For you. For everything you've built. Don't let him destroy your territory because you're trying to protect me. I can't make that decision without knowing if you're staying. Yes, you can. You have to. Elena walked back to him, cupped his face in her hands. Make the choice you need to make. Be the person you need to be to survive in your world. And then, when the dust settles, I'll decide if I'm brave enough to stand beside that person. She kissed him, soft and desperate and tasting like goodbye, and left before he could argue. The next 5 days were the hardest of Elena's life. She went to work, came home, and tried to figure out if she was brave enough or foolish enough to stay in Roman's world. Marissa came over with wine and told her she'd support whatever decision she made. Lucia texted her daily, no pressure, just checking in, reminding her that loving someone dangerous didn't make you weak. On the third day, Denise cornered her at the bookstore. The men watching you are gone, she said quietly. Elena's heart stopped. What men? The ones who've been hanging around for the past 2 weeks. Different guys, taking shifts, always keeping an eye on the door. Denise's expression was worried. But they left yesterday, all of them, at the same time, like someone called them off. Elena knew what that meant. Roman had made his choice, had handled the Kozlov situation in whatever way he'd decided was necessary. She called Lucia. Is it over? She asked without preamble. Define over. Lucia's voice was careful. Kozlov's operations got raided by federal agents yesterday. Turns out someone gave them very detailed information about his trafficking network. He's going to prison for a very long time. His organization is falling apart. Elena's breath caught. Roman did that. Roman made sure the right information got to the right people. No violence, no bodies, just strategic information sharing. Lucia paused. He found a way to win without becoming his father. Because of you. Because you told him to make the right choice, not the easy one. Elena sat down hard on her couch. Is he okay? He's handling the fallout. There are always consequences when you take down someone like Kozlov. But he's okay. Tired. Worried you're not coming back. Lucia's voice softened. Are you? Coming back? Elena looked around her small apartment. Safe. Quiet. Lonely. She thought about Roman's careful honesty. About how he'd told her the truth even when lies would have been easier. About how he'd found a way to protect her without compromising who he was trying to be. Yes, she said. I'm coming back. Good. Because he's been insufferable without you. I'm tired of dealing with his moping. Elena almost laughed. Where is he? His office. He's been there for 3 days straight dealing with the territorial reshuffling. Want me to tell him you're coming? No, I'll surprise him. She took a car to his building, too impatient for the train, and rode the elevator to the top floor with her heart hammering. Michael was at his desk and looked up in surprise. Miss Vale, he's in a meeting. I don't care. Elena walked past him to Roman's office door and opened it without knocking. Roman was at his desk with 3 men Elena didn't recognize, clearly in the middle of intense discussion. He looked up, and the expression that crossed his face made her chest tight. Gentlemen, he said without looking away from Elena, we're done here. Get out. The men left quickly. The door closed behind them. Elena and Roman stared at each other across the expensive office. You handled it, Elena said, without violence, without becoming your father. I handled it the only way I knew how, without losing you. Roman stood slowly. Elena. She crossed the room and kissed him, hard and desperate and full of everything she'd been too scared to say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she pressed her forehead to his. I'm sorry, she whispered. for leaving when you needed me, for making you handle that alone. You didn't make me handle it alone. You gave me permission to handle it the right way. There's a difference. Roman's arms came around her, holding tight. I thought I'd lost you. You almost did. I was terrified of your world, of the danger, of watching you become someone else to keep me safe. Elena pulled back to look at him, but then I realized something. You're not going to become your father. Not because of me, not because of anything. You've already proven that. You've spent years proving it, and I was an idiot to doubt you. You weren't an idiot. You were protecting yourself. Roman cupped her face in his hands. I don't blame you for being scared. My life is terrifying. My world is dangerous. Loving me means accepting risks most people never have to consider. I know, and I'm accepting them. Because the alternative, going back to my safe, small life without you, that's scarier than anything your world can throw at me. Elena's voice steadied. I love you, Roman. I'm in this. Completely. For whatever comes next. Roman's expression cracked open into something vulnerable and raw. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. They stood there in his office, holding each other, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Certainty. Choice. The knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. So what happens now? She asked eventually. Now I take you to dinner somewhere that's not expensive or formal or full of people trying to impress me. Roman smiled. And then I take you home. My home. And I convince you to stay. I might need some convincing. I'm very persuasive when properly motivated. They left the office, hand in hand. Michael looked relieved. In the elevator, Roman pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming back, for giving me another chance, for being brave enough to stay when leaving would have been easier. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, scared, hiding, convinced she wasn't strong enough to risk anything. She thought about who she was now, still scared, still learning, but standing beside someone who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. Thank you for being worth staying for, she said. The next 3 months were far from perfect. There were hard conversations and difficult adjustments and moments when Elena questioned whether she was strong enough for this life. Roman's world didn't become safer or easier. His family didn't suddenly accept her without reservation. The scrutiny and judgment didn't disappear. But they figured it out together. Elena moved into Roman's apartment after 6 weeks, partly because her lease was up, and partly because neither of them could stand being apart anymore. She kept working at the bookstore, not because she needed the money, but because she needed something that was hers alone. Roman's business stayed complicated and sometimes dangerous, but he kept his promise. He was honest with her about what he could share and respectful about what he couldn't. Victoria invited Elena to lunch once a month, ostensibly to stay connected, but actually, Elena suspected, to make sure she was still strong enough for this life. They developed an unlikely friendship built on brutal honesty and mutual respect for Roman's well-being. Lucia became the sister Elena never had, teaching her the social politics of Roman's world and covering for her when family dinners got overwhelming. Even Tomas eventually stopped making cutting remarks, though Elena suspected that had more to do with Roman's quiet threat than any actual change of heart. It was a cold January evening, 6 months after Elena had walked back into Roman's office, when he took her to the coffee shop where they'd first met. You're being weird, Elena said as they walked inside. This is our place, but you're acting like it's a special occasion. Maybe it is. They ordered coffee for him, tea for her, the same drinks they'd had that first day, and sat at a table by the window. Outside, snow was starting to fall, soft and quiet. Roman reached across the table and took her hand. I have something to ask you. Elena's heart stuttered. Okay. 6 months ago, you walked into my life when I wasn't looking for anyone. You were terrified and trying to be invisible and completely unlike anyone I'd ever met, and I fell in love with you before I knew what was happening. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You've survived my family, my world, my mistakes. You've been brave when I've been cowardly. You've pushed me to be better than I thought I could be. You've made my life mean something beyond just survival. Roman, let me finish. He smiled slightly. I know this life isn't what you expected. I know it's hard and scary and sometimes overwhelming. I know you could probably find someone easier to love, someone whose world doesn't come with so many risks." He paused. "But I'm asking you anyway. Marry me, Elena. Not because you have to, not because it would help anything politically or socially or in any practical way, but because I love you. Because I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to deserve you. Because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." He pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry she'd seen at family dinners. It looked like her, like something she'd actually choose. Elena's eyes burned with tears. "That's really unfair." "What is?" "Proposing in the place where we met. That's emotional manipulation." "Is it working?" She laughed through tears. "Yes, you asshole. Yes, I'll marry you." Roman's face transformed into pure joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because of course he'd figured that out somehow, and kissed her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saying yes, for choosing this, for choosing me. Thank you for being someone worth choosing." They stayed in the coffee shop for an hour, making plans and laughing and imagining a future that 6 months ago had seemed impossible. When they finally left, snow was falling harder, blanketing the city in quiet white. Roman pulled her close as they walked to the car. "One more thing." "What?" "I'm setting up a foundation for women who've been victimized by fraud and financial abuse. Free legal help, credit counseling, resources for rebuilding." He looked at her carefully. "I thought it could be called the Elena Vale Foundation, if you're comfortable with that." Elena stopped walking. "Roman, that's too much." "It's not enough, but it's a start." His voice was serious. "You survived something that destroys most people. You rebuilt yourself without help. I want to make sure other women have the support you didn't. And I want them to know that survival is possible, that rebuilding is possible, that there's life after someone tries to destroy you." Elena was crying again. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me run it. Say you'll use your experience to help other women. Say you'll take something terrible that happened to you and turn it into something that matters." She kissed him right there on the snowy sidewalk. "Yes, to all of it. Yes." They got married 4 months later in a small ceremony that somehow still had 60 people. Roman's family attended, Victoria in the front row, looking almost proud. Lucia was maid of honor, cracking jokes during her toast that made everyone laugh and a few people uncomfortable. Even Tomas gave a grudging speech about family and loyalty and accepting people who earned their place. Denise from the bookstore came and brought half the staff. Marissa cried through the entire ceremony, and Elena wore a dress that was simple and beautiful and exactly right, and married the man who'd seen her at her most invisible and decided she was worth knowing. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when Roman's world demanded things that scared her, still family dinners that felt like combat, still nights when he came home tired and tense from handling problems he couldn't share, still times when Elena wondered if she was strong enough for this life. But there were more moments when Roman came home and found her curled up in their living room writing in the notebook she'd bought to replace the ones Marcus had made her destroy. Moments when they cooked dinner together and argued about whose turn it was to do dishes. Moments when Lucia showed up unannounced with wine and gossip. Moments when Victoria called Elena directly instead of going through Roman, asking her opinion on family business because she'd learned Elena's perspective was valuable. Moments when Elena looked around her life, complicated and messy and dangerous and full, and realized she was happy. Not the safe, quiet happiness of hiding. Not the careful, controlled happiness of keeping everyone at arm's length. But the deep, complicated happiness that came from choosing something hard because it was worth it. From loving someone completely even when it was scary. From being seen and known and valued for exactly who she was. A year after their wedding, Elena sat in Roman's office. Their office now, since she'd taken over managing the foundation full-time, and looked at the applications piled on her desk. Women asking for help. Women who'd been destroyed by people they trusted. Women who thought rebuilding was impossible. She picked up her pen and started making notes. Who to help first? What resources they needed? How to give them the support she'd never had. Roman came in with coffee. He knew how she took it now, had known for so long she couldn't remember when he'd learned, and kissed the top of her head. "How's it going?" "Good. Overwhelming. Important. Elena looked up at him. Thank you for this. For giving me something that matters. You've always mattered. Roman sat on the edge of the desk. This just gives you a way to show other people what I've known all along. That you're strong enough to turn pain into purpose. That you're brave enough to help people even when you're still healing yourself. Elena reached for his hand, the ring on her finger catching light. I love you. I love you too. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms. Have I told you today how grateful I am that you walked into that coffee shop? Once or twice? Not enough then. They stood there in the office, holding each other, while the city sprawled below them and the foundation's work waited and the future stretched out full of complications and challenges and the deep, messy joy of choosing each other every single day. Elena had spent a year hiding from the world, convinced she wasn't strong enough to risk anything. Then she'd met a man who was dangerous and honest and capable of violence but chose gentleness with her, who'd seen her trying to be invisible and decided she deserved to be seen, who'd given her space to be afraid and time to be brave and love that didn't demand she be perfect. She'd survived betrayal and debt and shame. She'd survived his family and his world and the constant scrutiny of being someone who didn't fit. She'd learned to be strong in ways she never expected, found courage she didn't know she had, built a life that was nothing like what she'd imagined, and somehow better for it. And every day she chose it again, chose him, chose the hard, scary, complicated life they were building together. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was exactly what you needed. Sometimes being brave meant choosing risk over safety. Sometimes love meant accepting someone completely, darkness and danger and all, and trusting they'd do the same for you. Elena had learned that the hard way, but standing in Roman's arms, looking out at the city where they'd built something real from broken pieces, she couldn't imagine choosing anything else. This was her life now. Messy and imperfect and occasionally terrifying and completely, impossibly hers. And she wouldn't change a single thing.